Welcome to Actual Scale Modelling. This is part 3 of Airfix's VIII Wellington GR Mark 8. Scale is 1/72. In parts 1 and 2, I went through what was in the box, and in part 2, I started the build. In those parts, I did mention that I didn't do a particularly good job on this kit, and I shall reiterate that again. That the build did not go too well. But saying all that, it's still an interesting build, and it'll be good to show you all the mistakes that I've made. So let's jump into this and carry on with the build. So carry on straight where I left off. I've placed in the instrument panel, and now I'm just placing in one of the bulkheads. There is a dedicated space for this, but as I've said in part 2, make sure that you get the location done correctly, because you will find it difficult to close it up otherwise. Next to go in is a chair. I think this is the navigating chair or bomber chair. I'm not 100% sure. It does have its own location point. I did find that it was a little bit tricky to fit. Now, the instructions say fit this after you place on the table that goes over the top of it. I decided to place it in beforehand. It's here or there really. It doesn't really matter if you place it in now or afterwards, like the instructions suggest. It was fairly easy to fit. So as you can see there, I just took it out, and all I'm doing is just checking the fit, making sure everything is going to go in. And then once that's in, I can now fit another bulkhead. There's a few of them to go in. It does get a little bit tight in there when fitting them, but they do fit very nicely, and it's starting to build up to be a nice interior. I should say as well, as I'm going along, I'm just going to be touching up the paint. I'll be doing that constantly because I'll be making slight adjustments as I go. The tail section of the model, there's not much in there, but as you can see, I've got another 3 bulkheads to be placed in. These back ones are slightly different because they don't have any extra detail on them. The kit itself wasn't really meant to be shown this detail. This would be generally all closed up with the other part of the fuselage, which of course mine will not be. So once I placed the 3 in, it was time to go into the tail section. Now this bulkhead here needed a little bit of trimming. When I say the trimming, it's not the actual parts fault, it's just a little bit of bar that was left over from the sprue, and you really have to get them as flat as possible before placing them in. Here I'm just putting on some of the opposite side furniture. Now, again, you don't really have to put this on. All you're going to see is the back of it, but I think it does make it look more authentic with it in. Same with this gangplank here as well. It goes up to a raised section. Not sure what it's for, really, but again, it just adds to the overall look of the interior. And now I'm just placing in the last bulkhead. I should also point out at this point, I think everything is going swimmingly well. Believe it or not, it isn't. Unbeknown to me, this is where things start going a bit wrong. Where you see me placing this cover here, where my finger is, I was meant to cut that section off if I was doing the A variant. And I didn't cut it off. I didn't realise it. I didn't look at the instructions properly. So it's entirely my fault when I was doing this. I just carried on, glancing at the instructions, carrying on with the build. And that is one of the biggest mistakes any modeler can do. Don't think you know everything. Look at the instructions and follow them. That way you won't go wrong and you won't make the mistakes that I'm starting to make. I'm now using Humbrol's 123 Extra Dark Sea Grey for the rear part of the tail end, the same colour as the cockpit. instead of masking and things like that, it's easier just to paint over your background colour to achieve your next colour. Just saves on a lot of time in masking. And once that's dry, I was able then to fit the turret mount or the gun mount into this section. Again, depending on which variant you're doing, is depending on what you're doing with this. If you're doing variant B, the self section of this, the flat piece that goes towards the aircraft, that would be removed. If you're building the A variant, that stays in place. So now most of it's built, the interior. I'm just going to be placing this on top, the section that I cut away, to see how much of the interior that I can actually see through the lattice work. And although I've opened it up quite a bit and taken away quite a lot of material, you still can't see that much. Bear in mind, once the wing goes on, that is going to block a lot off. So I decided just to cut it all out. This could have been a bad idea. In fact, it probably was a bad idea. All the work, days of work it took to cut all the section out, I've decided to ignore it all, and the painting as well, and just get all the lattice work out. What can I say? It seems like a good idea at the time. So I've taken out two whole sections and marrying it up again, and I think I can see enough of the interior now to be happy with it. At this point I'm thinking it's a shame that I've lost the lattice work, but at least I can still see the interior. So once that was done, it was a matter of just tidying up the edges. Now, I didn't do a particularly good job of this at all. I'll go back to it later on in the build, but I thought I got it nice and smooth and straight, and I really didn't. There's a few little pilot holes and things you have to drill out at this stage, depending on what you're going to be placing on the outer fuselage. In the end, I made these holes, but I didn't utilise them with the parts. They were too small, and I would probably have broken them off anyway. But I made the holes at this point because I thought I was going to be placing them on. But in the grand scheme of things, I think the cockpit interior looks really nice once it's built up. So it's onto the engines now, and the interior is 56 aluminium by Umbro. There's a couple of little inserts to place into each engine here that just help separate them. You will see the innards more if you have the landing gear down. If you're having it up, even though this will all be closed off, I recommend putting these parts in anyway. It just adds to the stability and ease of build while you're building up these engines. The landing gear struts get placed in the engine cowls as well. Now, the instructions say do this afterwards, much later on within the build, but I thought after a bit of dry fitting, it'd be easier to fit everything now while I'm building the engine, so I can get into it, get the contact points and location points sorted out immediately, instead of trying to fumble my way in once everything was built up. And it seemed to work that way. Once I got the location points sorted, it was a simple case of adding the cement and just placing them on. There's two parts to the strut. There's the main one that will hold the wheels, and the other one is a supporting strut or piston that holds everything in place. And once I was happy with the positioning, it was then an easy case to put the other half aside. Now, again, with these engines, I would say it was better to do all this, but just be aware it is an awkward shape, and you will need to dry fit it a couple of times probably until you're 100% sure how the thing goes together, if you're going to be doing it this way. The other way, putting the two halves together, may be easier, but placing on the landing gear struts could be a lot more difficult once the engine is actually made up. And this is where I'll leave part 3. So if you haven't done so already, why don't you check out the channel for my other builds? If you subscribe to the channel, make sure you hit the notification bell. That way you'll be kept up to date with all my builds. hit that like button. Don't be afraid to leave a comment, and of course you can share the video. But for now, thank you all very much for watching. Bye bye.